everybody. My name is Jeremy Fish, and I'm the first artist in residence in the Haight Street Counterculture Artist in Residence project in the Doolin Larson building on the corner of Haight-Ashbury. And it is currently the second to last day of October in the year 2020. The whole point of this was to record an archive of stories for this residency so that anyone that does this in the future has things to listen to that can inform them about the history of this area. And so accordingly, my very first guest and the first person to record a story is one of my favorite artists from this area, Stanley Mouse. Thanks a lot for coming today, Stanley. I appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Feel free to tell any story you want about this area or yourself, or something you think might be interesting to somebody down the road.
When I first arrived in San Francisco from Detroit in 1965, this area was mom and pop area, not mom and pot.
Not yet.
I guess the beatniks from downtown San Francisco,
North Beach.
North Beach, they wanted to move out of North Beach, and so they picked this neighborhood to move to. So all the beatniks moved to Haight-Ashbury, and the town was filling up with long-haired. We called ourselves the long hairs, or freaks, and they followed suit with the beatniks and started populating the Haight-Ashbury.
What year would have that been, roughly?
That was 65.
Okay.
And by 66, they started moving in here in a psychedelic shop. I don't know what date they opened, but probably 66. And then in 67, I rented a building here, a storefront. It was called Pacific Ocean Trading Company. Abbreviated, it was POTCO.
Where was that?
It was just past Clayton Street on the left, across the street from the Straight Theater.
Okay.
And sometimes there was such a parade going up down the street every day in 67 that sometimes we would close the doors, set up chairs inside the shop, and just watch.
All the people walking around?
Yeah, watch the people walking out there. They'd come down with fire and big cymbals and bongs and who knows what. One time there was a bus that broke down. It was a tour bus, and it broke down right in front of my shop, and it was really hot. It was like 95 degrees out, and it was, I guess, anyway, it was hot. I don't know how hot San Francisco gets, but nobody would get off the bus.
They were
afraid. They were afraid to get off the bus, so they stayed in, and there was no air conditioning and stuff, and they're all sweating inside the bus. And we all sat around the bus and had a fun time jeering at them.
Like getting stuck inside a safari and you don't want to get out and mess with the lions.
Wild animals.
Yeah.
Chocolate George, one of the Hells Angels in 67, was driving his motorcycle down the Haight Street and crashed in front of my store. He died. It was a big deal.
I've heard a lot about him, and I've heard his name a lot since I've been up here.
Yeah, he was cool.
The Hells Angels had a house on Ashbury, right, at that time?
I don't know.
I read that there was one on down the street from where the Grateful Dead lived, that they had like a headquarters there in the 60s.
Yeah. I used to have I had a really cool, like 1888 horse-drawn buggy firehouse. It was halfway between the Haight and the Castro on Henry Street. And it was really beautiful. And Kelly and I had a studio upstairs. There was a mezzanine, and I lived there too. And Big Brother and Holden Company practiced downstairs. And the old story, you've probably heard a million times, that they auditioned Janis Joplin in my studio with the band. And after they auditioned her, the band came up and said, "What do you think about her?" And I said, "She's either really great or really bad." And then that night, I knocked on the door, and I went down, and it was the police, and they said, "We have a report of a woman screaming in here." I had to explain to them that it was Janis Joplin auditioning for the band that practiced there.
Where was that? You said it was on Henry Street?
On Henry Street, Henry and Noe.
And it was like an old converted fire station?
It was an old fire station, yeah. It still looked like a fire station. It just wasn't converted.
Cool. And it was a rental or like something?
Yeah, it was a rental.
So cool.
And I did a lot of posters there with Kelly, and then the diggers kind of came to town, and they said, "Can we fix a car there?" Because I had some space, and I said, "Oh, sure, man." And there was a car, and then there's a bunch of diggers, and they're from New York, right? And they're always swearing. And then there was 2 cars. Then there was 3 cars.
Uh-oh.
That whole place filled up with New York diggers. And I'd come downstairs, and they go, "Who the fuck are you?" And I said, "This is time to leave." And so the Grateful Dead right here, just up the street, offered me, they rented the house across the street from their house, and they offered me the top floor in their house to have as a studio in the crash.
Killer. So that's when you moved out of the fire station?
So I moved. Plus it was closer to
your shop.
My shop that I rented. So.
And when would this have been roughly?
That was in '67.
Killer. Good time to get closer to this area and
yeah.
Let those guys take over your garage.
So, let's see, I guess one time I woke up, and it was a Saturday morning, and I heard some really nice music out coming in the window. It was like in the summer. And I stuck my head out the window, and music was coming from the Panhandle. So I put my clothes on and went down there, and there was a flatbed truck with a crowd around it in the Panhandle of the park, and it was Jimi Hendrix doing a concert in the park.
In the Panhandle?
In the Panhandle, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's a nice thing to wake up to.
Yeah, it was great. Things don't happen like that anymore.
Well, let's hope. I just don't know where it's happening.
Yeah, where? Somewhere it's happening.
Yeah, I hope. It's got to be. Had you seen him perform before?
I'm not sure. Around that time, I think he played the Fillmore that I saw him at. Matter of fact, that night when he played the Fillmore, I was on foot, and somebody said, after the show, they said, "We're going past your studio. Do you want to ride?" So I said, "Yeah." So I got in the car in the back seat, and it was dark. And we took off, and the streetlights lit up the back seat, and I looked next to me, and Jimi Hendrix sitting next to me.
Awesome.
And we're both tripping our brains out. So nothing was said. There was no small talk.
Just riding around in a car with him, tripping your brains out.
Yeah, that was really cool.
That's cool. It's a nice way to meet a guy.
Let's see, other Haight Street stories.
Those are some gems right there.
There's a mural with me on it up the street.
Mm-hmm. Was there anything like that back then? Was the neighborhood muraled at all, or was it mainly just the storefronts and things like that?
I think murals started to happen after Haight-Ashbury. One of my dear friends, Miranda Bergman, I met her on Haight Street, and she became a muralist and turned out a whole bunch of murals all through the city and Oakland and the Mission. I just saw her last week.
Does she live up near you?
She lives in Oakland,
Okay.
but she comes up to Sebastopol once a while. What
Are you
else?
still in touch with any other artists from that time period? Like when you lived around here?
Oh, yeah, that's a good story. When I first got here, well, I came in '65, and then I got drafted. I went back to Detroit and got out of the draft board by taking huge amounts of LSD. And my girlfriend just pointed me to the door. But when I got back, when I was here the first time, they were doing parties, and there were like great parties in people's houses with bands and everybody getting tripping, and it was great fun. But when I got back, those parties turned into dance halls, dance concerts. And they were doing posters for them, and I looked on you could see them. There were posters plastered everywhere, in all the windows and on all the poles, and it was Wes Wilson doing his thing for the Family Dog, or maybe for Fillmore.
Cool.
And they were really fantastic. It just blew my mind, these posters.
Yeah.
And kind of remind me of the kind of funk art that the Beatniks did in the earlier days, but taken to like a psychedelic level. And I looked at Wes's posters and I went, I want to do that. I can do that. And so I got a hold of Kelly, who was art director for Family Dog, and they gave me some posters to do. And then Kelly and I got together and did like the Zigzag poster and the Skeleton Roses Grateful Dead poster.
Amazing. This is killer. So like that kind of stuff, when you left to go back to Detroit, wasn't really going off yet?
No,
And when you came back
it was
is when
just
you
big
discovered
parties.
it. And the big parties turned into stuff that needed a poster because they became more like concerts and dance events
Right.
and things like that.
Because all they had back then was AM radio, and they couldn't advertise on radio, or the posters was the only way they could advertise. And pretty much our posters changed the whole look of graphic art and commercial graphics.
Yeah, it had a huge effect on like all visual imagery everywhere. I mean, they were a real, connection to that time period, told a real narrative about this area and the music and all the things. I mean, to me, looking at them years later when I discovered it.
We blew all the windows out.
Yeah. Were they all, what was the printing back then? Screen printed, serigraph? Like, how were they actually reproducing
they
a
were
lot
done
of those?
on small printing presses, usually.
Independent people, like in their homes and stuff like that?
No,
or is there a company that was doing them?
No, the ones, luckily, my studio on Henry Street, right around the corner was Frank Westlake and Bindweed Press. And he lived upstairs, and in his basement, which was street height, he could open his garage door, and inside was printing presses. Printing presses and pump organs. He collected pump organs.
Cool.
And so I could actually go in there and watch him print. And one time they were printing my Jim Queskin, the lady with the green hair, poster. And it was like a kind of a warm San Francisco night. And he had the door open, and I was kind of tripping. And the printing press was going chicka 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 chicka. And so I got on the pump organ and started to play along with the rhythm of the printing press and watching these colorful posters come off the printing press.
Killer. That's a nice memory.
It was a good night.
Playing along to the rhythm of the printing press. I'm going to have to try and go figure out where these were on Henry Street. You said it was Henry and Noe?
Henry and Noe, yeah.
I wonder what they are now. I wonder if I'll be able to recognize what would have been the fire.
There's a sushi bar on the corner now. Good one.
Cool. I'll use that to figure out where I am.
Yeah, I went there with Victoria Binder from the museum, and we had sushi there one night and talked about my studio and Bindweed Press, because we were right there.
How long did you keep this spot here on Haight Street?
Until the death of the hippie. What happened was, like, they declared the death of the hippie, and then they had the whole ceremony with the.
I've seen pictures of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Bobby Kennedy got shot. Martin Luther King got shot. The street turned into. You couldn't. It was dangerous to walk down the street. It was just horrible.
All around the same time, like the death of the hippie, those two murders, and then this street just.
It just all folded at the same time, and so I left for. I think I stayed at Kelly's house in the. I don't know, in the Mission somewhere. I can't remember. And then on Sutter Street. And then I was on Sutter Street, and Eric Clapton called me and said, come to London to flame my Rolls Royce.
Killer.
And it was a joke. A friend of mine I could hear laughing behind him. But it got me to go to London. And so I left the demise of Haight Street for the London scene, and it was really fun.
Stanley, what was that, like 69-ish?
69, yeah. The end of 68.
That's when you went to London?
Yeah.
How long were you there?
A year.
Cool.
I came back for Woodstock.
Sick.
I shouldn't have. I should have stayed.
Yeah? What were you doing in London at that time?
I arrived there, and Eric Clapton just got busted for hash.
Oh, shit.
Matter of fact, the whole house where he lived on got busted, and he lived on a really cool, like, bunch of artists and musicians were living at the house or building. It was a building on Chelsea, and anyway, he was on. He escaped, and he was on the run. And that night, when I got there, he had a party at his manager's house, Stigwood's. He was his manager, and I arrived in town that day and got to go to that party. And there was George Harrison and Eric and a whole slew of people. Cream was there, and
Killer.
And I guess it was the night that Eric was going to tell George that he was going to take off with his wife or something. And they actually named it. It was the birthday party, and the Beatles wrote a song about it.
Damn.
So I got to be there for that, my first night in London. And I'm going, this is a great scene.
Man, seriously.
And then George played ditties until like 3 or 4 in the morning, and on his guitar, and then 6 or 7 in the morning, somebody came by and said, everybody out. I had nowhere to go, so I went down to the East End and got a hotel. So I went from the very highest scene in the city to the very lowest in 24 hours.
Welcome to London.
And so I worked my way up from the East End to Notting Hill Gate and area, and lived in a house with a friend of mine, Richard DiLello, who was the office hippie, the American token office hippie at Apple Corps. And so I got to go hang out at Apple. And I did some Beatles stuff and did some Blind Faith stuff and
Cool.
did some work for Nova magazine.
Wow, that's awesome. And that's all still roughly like 69.
69, yeah.
Man, that's killer. That must have been a crazy record label to go to at that time.
It was fun, yeah.
Why? And you said you came back for Woodstock.
Well, I heard Kelly was doing the signage at Woodstock, and so it was being built up so big. I thought I'd go there and maybe help him or something, and so I ended up at Woodstock in the rain and the mud.
Did you do any signs?
No, I didn't do anything. I guess I got there too late. And then, but I stayed in Cambridge for 6 months, and Kelly and I did Jimi Hendrix album cover, and just as we finished it, he died.
Damn.
And so it never came out, and it got morphed into Journey covers later.
Wow. By the label?
What's that?
It got morphed into a Journey cover, like just got repurposed at some point.
It was a scarab beetle with wings, so that's what we had it laying around, so we thought we'd do another one like that. That was same motif.
I feel like I've seen that Journey cover. I never realized it had started out as a Jimi Hendrix. That's awesome. Did you come back here at some point after that?
Yeah, so then I headed back here, and I lucked out getting that attic in that mansion that I told you about that was rented by the Congress of Wonders. They were making a movie called Marijuana Hell.
What's the Congress of Wonders? Sorry to
They were a
interrupt you.
comedy group that played at the Fillmore and Avalon Ballroom.
Okay.
And so they never really did make the movie, but I got to live in this beautiful mansion on Market and Castro when it was still a mom and pop neighborhood.
Like not a big party neighborhood like it is now.
Yeah. It was really fun.
When's that? Like early 70s?
That was 70s, yeah. And I did the Working Man's Dead cover then.
Sweet. In that attic?
Yeah.
Badass. Did you work out of that place for a long time?
For, I don't know, maybe 6 months or so.
Oh, okay.
Or longer.
While they were working on that movie?
Yeah.
It's hard for me to imagine that neighborhood being like, I moved here 26 years ago, and I mean, it's always been the same the whole time I've lived here, just like a wild
It was very sweet. There was a little movie show, and there was a bakery and a hardware store.
hard for me to imagine. I always just picture it sort of the way it still is, kind of. It's cool to imagine it being a lot more like family-oriented and kind of down to earth. I've seen photos of it when it was like that. I had a girlfriend that worked at the Castro Theater when I was younger. So where did you go after that house?
Wow. I went to Mexico, back to Detroit, lived in Toronto for a while, Vancouver, and then Marin County.
Cool. So that house was kind of your last stop in the city?
Yeah.
And by now you've given up the storefront, and that's gone?
Yeah. That just lasted for 1 year, 67.
Did you get rid of it? Yeah, you got rid of it by the time you went to London and all that?
Yeah.
Well, man, that's like 20 stories you just told me in one long one. So if you know, that's more than what I was looking for, was exactly just that. Those are awesome, dude.
I kind of went off of Haight Street there, but...
Yeah, like that's a starting point, but I don't know. I didn't know a lot of that stuff, and I really appreciate you sharing it with me.
Other stories on Haight Street.
Yeah, like, what were some of your neighbors? Like, who else was, when you had the store, you mentioned you were across the street from the Straight Theater, and I read about that a little bit.
There was always some kind of crazy show at the Straight Theater. That was fun. Then a human being being happened when I was at the. This is a crazy story. When I had the shop there on Haight, I did a poster for it, and we did these signs, or the flags. We had a silk screen set up, and we did these flags with big pot symbols on them, and big yellow flags on big poles. And I said, well, I'll bring them with me when I come to the human being. And so it was happening, and we all dropped some acid and started carrying these poles to the park. And we're walking and walking and walking and walking. Then we're going through these swamps and wet. It was January, and there was a lot of wet places, and our feet were muddy. And these poles turned into, when I was tripping on coming onto acid, the poles turned into crosses. And there I was carrying my cross into the human being. And I kept saying, here, take this. And nobody would take it from me. And I started freaking out even more. And a friend of mine saw that I was freaking out, and he grabbed me and took me back to my shop on Haight Street. And we just stayed there all afternoon and had a great trip.
Well, what wound up happening with your giant pole? Who took the sign?
We just left them.
Lost it somewhere?
It's funny, I see pictures of the human being, and there's people with the big flags.
One of them might have been your cross to bear.
Yeah, it was funny about the Jesus thing. In the 67, everybody looked like Jesus. Everybody had a beard and sandals, and some people even wore robes. And there were signs in the windows, in the doorways that said, "You know Jesus by what he does, not what he looks like," or something like that. And I was at the end of the street was Bob's Drive-In, and me and a friend of mine who also looked like Jesus, we're all sitting at the counter, and I look around, and everybody in the place is a guy looking like Jesus, like 30 of them. And the waitress freaks out. She goes, "You're not Jesus, you're not Jesus." And she's freaking out. And so I guess her boss comes and takes her away, and all the Jesuses just go back to eating. It's like nothing ever happened.
That's a funny picture.
Yeah, that'd be a good one.
Yeah, really. Such a Jesus lookalike contest that no one had entered.
Right. I guess that's what LSD does to somebody.
I like the fact that people had signs in the window that says,
Right, calling out the fake Jesus.
Yeah, you can't just be Jesus because you look like him.
Yeah, it's what you do.
It's funny, I'd never really thought about it like that. I've seen it my whole life as like hippies, it looks like this. But I imagine if you were here at that time, it would have been such a contrast. Everybody out here looking like Jesus suddenly. A major shift in like the way young people dressed at that time must have been really shocking.
Yeah, it's funny how religious kind of everybody looked. I went to Europe one time and the Dead were playing. I think must have been in Paris, and there were all these French dead or European deadheads, and they were all in a clump in this beautiful, what do they call those places where people walk around in?
Piazza,
whatever, yeah. And they're all looking like the Holy Land. They're all clumped together and sitting down, and they all had robes and long hair, and it was a really spectacular sight. But I wish I had gotten a photograph of that.
That's cool. I didn't realize it had caught on like that over there that early.
But I think that's what LSD does to people.
Was the LSD scene in Europe that early? Like when you were going over there to London?
Well, this is later.
Period?
This is later. This is
like 70s.
Yeah, or Yeah, I did the cover for One More Saturday Night book, and we had posters and things, and we would go around Paris and stick the posters up places. Like we were eating in this one really fancy restaurant, and we waited till the waiter wasn't looking, and we stuck one in the window and ran down the street. Ran out of the place and started running down the street, and the waiter's chasing after us, and he finally catches us and he says, "Do you have any more posters?"
He was just being supportive as opposed to trying to bust you guys for putting a poster in the window.
So I guess the Dead played in Paris, and I was with I lost his name. He did Shakedown Street. Gilbert. What's that? Gilbert Shelton, right. And he did Shakedown Street, great album cover. And I was hanging out with him and Crumb, actually, but Gilbert and I tried to go to the concert, and we went there and tried to get in, and they wouldn't let us in. We missed, so we couldn't get into Paris Grateful Dead concert.
You went all the way there for it, but didn't get to go?
Well, it just happened that it was on at the same time.
Okay. Were there other artists on Haight Street during the time that you had the shop? Not to jump time periods, but
Other what?
Artists, or were you kind of like the? I've heard about a lot of crazy shops, but not necessarily like artist studios.
Yeah. Victor was Victor Moscoso was up in Marin, and Wes. I think he was in the city. Then Wes moved to Lagunitas, I think. And Randy Tootin lived in the city for a long time, but that was later.
Did you know Rick Griffin?
Yeah. Oh, a story about Rick Griffin. When I first moved here, or the second time I came back, I lived on 17th Street in a little house there, and next door was an apartment building, and I kept seeing this pretty blonde girl go in and out of it, and it turned out to be Rick Griffin's wife, Ida, and then Kelly and I moved. Then I moved to the firehouse and worked with Kelly there, and we did like the Skull and Roses poster, and Ida took it and took it down to Rick, who was in LA, and Rick made a beeline up here.
Oh, cool. It was incentive to like work with other dudes, kind of?
It was a what?
It was like incentive for him to come back up here.
Oh yeah, when he saw what was going on up here, he was probably salivating all the way.
That's rad. So your work became like a reason for him to come back up here?
Yeah, because what was going on here was mind blowing.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Well, man, you gave me more stories than I even expected. So if there's anything else you'd like to leave a mark on, but you just gave me that's the start of my archive right there.